Okay. Good evening, everybody. This is Earl Boyd for our next session of GNEC's Urban Entrepreneur Development Institute. And I would like to welcome everybody this evening. Hopefully, everybody has had a good weekend and a good start to the week. Maybe you have already started your business and maybe you made some money, or for those who have not actually started, you've made some good progress on the plans to put your business up and running and get it in place. But I'm glad to be here this evening. We should have another good session and got some power packed information ready for you and ready to share. So, as usual, I like to first of all know if everybody out there can hear me. If you can hear me, okay, place a one in the chat. If you're having some problems, place a two. But I like to know if everybody can hear me. All right. Um, Also, I want to make sure that everybody can see the slides on your screen. And if you can see those slides, please respond in the chat with a one. If you're having any problems, let me know, place a two. But hopefully you'll be able to see the slides. The first slide says session 5, Planet Operations Plan. So I just want to make sure that everyone can see that slide and just respond to me in the chat. I can say that over the last 5 or 6 weeks or so, however long we've been together, these sessions have really been good for me, in terms of being able to relay information to you on the slides through the online vehicle. I've been able to put some good examples of how business works and really communicate them through the slides. And it seems that people are getting the information and really being able to understand what it is that we're trying to communicate within it. So I'm pleased about that. So it seems that everybody's fine with the slides. So we'll begin. What we're going to do this evening, as you see on your screen, it says session 5. Actually, we've done more sessions than this. I think this is like the 8th time we've been together. This session 5 was supposed to happen during the 5th week, and that's why it's still titled session 5, but it deals with operations. And because of the fact that we had added an additional session on defining and researching, we kind of moved the schedule back a little bit and arranged some things a little differently when it came to the financial piece. So we are now going back to operations. So this evening, we're going to talk about operations. We're also going to, before getting into operations, we're going to review some of the things we covered last week involving cash flow. And then the other thing that we will do before getting into operations, after reviewing last week's session, I realized that I needed to spend a little more time making it clear what we're talking about when we say cost of goods, cost of service, and how to develop what your cost of goods and service are. So I'm going to spend some time talking about that, and then we'll get into operations. So that's what we'll be doing this evening. And as usual, if you have any questions during the seminar, during the session, I'll give you all time to ask questions at certain points and make sure that I respond to those questions. All right. So in reviewing session 7 last week, we talked about cash flow planning. And the first thing that I want to review are the different cash categories that show up on the cash flow statement and help make up the content. And it starts with identifying what are the startup expenses. If you're a new business, you're gonna have some expenses in the beginning to just get the business up and running. And that's what we call startup expenses. So that's the first category of expenses that we are trying to identify. The second category is operating expenses. And what we mean by operating expenses, those are the expenses that the business incurs to do its daily functions, those costs that are outside of producing the product or service, but those things that are called fixed costs or ongoing costs. It's the overhead operating expenses, or those daily functional expenses to keep the business functioning. The third thing is defining your gross profit margin. And the reason we need to calculate that is that's going to give us what we need in terms of producing the revenue numbers that we need to have for sales. So the way that we calculate gross profit margin is the gross profit amount divided by the selling price. And remember, we had the selling price minus the cost to make it, or the cost to produce the product or service, gave us the gross profit amount. And then we take the gross profit amount and divide that by the selling price, and that gives us the gross profit margin in a percentage. And then we're ready to do the sales projection. And as we discussed last week, the toughest part about doing a cash flow projection is trying to project what the sales will be, particularly when you're talking about a new business. So what we suggested that as a starting place is to take a look at what kind of sales are going to be required for the business to break even. And the way that we calculate break even is we take the operating expenses and divide by the gross profit margin percentage. And that will give us the amount of dollars that we need for the business to break even. And in break even, we mean that we've covered all of our costs, the cost to produce the product or service, the operating expenses that are involved in operating the business, and we have enough sales to cover all of the expenses. There's no net profit, but there's no net loss either. You've covered all of the expenses. So that's the starting place that we use to project those sales. So the next thing that we talked about in cash flow planning was that once you've identified what those startup costs are, what the operations expenses are, what those initial sales projections are going to be, when you spread that on your spreadsheet or in your Excel form, whatever you're using, you leave the beginning cash category blank. And you leave that blank so you can get a determination of what kind of money you're going to need to start the business. And by leaving that blank, you'll probably come up with a lot of negative ending cash amounts every month. And it's the highest cash shortfall in those monthly ending cash expenses that indicate how much money you need to start the business. So after going through that and you've laid that out and you've gotten a look at what that picture looks like, then kind of analyze the results. Am I being a bit too optimistic about my sales? Are there some expenses that I may be able to reduce in the operations area? In startup, well, maybe instead of getting all brand new equipment, maybe I can get some that's pre-owned and reduce my costs. You just analyze the results. You make some adjustments or look at different scenarios. And what I mean by looking at different scenarios, Maybe you'll look at a best case scenario or a worst case scenario, but you just spend some time analyzing and thinking through and challenging the results that you have. And after doing that, then you make a decision about which one you feel most comfortable with and the one that represents what you're going to start with. And then the final thing we talked about is defining the assumptions. And what the assumptions do is tell the story behind the numbers. How did you get to the sales figures? Those payroll expenses you have, what are they for? Who are they paying? How much are they being paid for the job responsibilities? The expense categories that you have. It's the story behind the numbers that we do in the assumption. So what we have on the display now is just kind of what we went through, looking at Jerry's cash flow. And Jerry has his beginning cash, his startup expenses identified. He's also laid in the operating expenses every month for the business. He's projected sales up at the top of what his sales are going to be monthly, starting with $7,500 in January and then growing to $40,000 in December. But this red arrow down at the bottom of where it says ending cash shows that Jerry has a negative $48,868. And that's the highest cash shortfall that Jerry has on this sales projection. And as you see up at the top where it says beginning cash, startup, it's blank. And that's what I mentioned earlier when we were talking on the previous slide, that you leave that category blank. This is the example. You leave startup cash blank. You put in all of the rest of the numbers, sales, startup expenses, operating expenses, and you'll come up with ending cash showing some negatives. Whatever that highest negative or highest cash shortfall is, at a minimum, that's what you need, or that's what's required to start the business. Doesn't guarantee anything that you got it all right, but at least you've done all of your homework, your due diligence, thought it through, analyzed it, and you've taken a look at the money it's going to require. And it's better doing it this way than just pulling a number out of the air, saying I need X amount and not really have anything to base that on. So now we're seeing Jerry make those adjustments. You see up at the top where it says owner contribution and other sources. When Jerry was doing his research, it said that most of these independent bike shops required $75,000. So he identified that as the amount that he was going to try to start with. So even though the previous slide showed that shortfall is $49,000, that's a minimum. That's with everything going perfect as he described in that projection would require $49,000, but more than likely everything isn't going to go perfectly. Some months sales may not come in. Some expenses may end up being higher than he projected. So he needs some amount beyond that. And in Jerry's case, he's saying $75,000. And then down at the bottom, at the ending cash, you see all of Jerry's cash shortfalls have now disappeared. So that's what we talked about, and that's how you want to take a look at your cash flow projections and make some decisions about them. Any questions about that? Any question pertaining to the cash flow or in cash flow projections? And we will talk a little further about the next steps for you laying out your cash flow projection at the end of tonight's session, when we start talking about what we have on the agenda for next week and for next Saturday. Any questions at all? Well, if there are no questions, last week when we were talking about cash flow, and even the previous session that we did on the Saturday and for last week's recap, we talked about pricing, profit margin, break even, those issues. But I thought I needed to spend a little more time talking about identifying your cost of goods or cost of service. Because if you don't know what it's costing you to produce a product or service, you can't price it right. So it's important to identify every element that makes up the cost. So I just want to go through a couple of examples and just looking at various elements that come into play when you're talking about determining your cost of goods or cost of service. So here's an example we're going to talk about. Let's talk about a business that's a cleaning service. They're cleaning office buildings or residential cleaning. That's the service they're providing. And they have employees that are actually going in to do the service. And so we're going to take a look at what are the elements that make up the cost. First, looking at the labor and the people that are doing the work. So they are paying the people $20 an hour. Now, I know that's high for a cleaning service, but it's a new day. We're paying great wages. We're going beyond, much beyond the minimum wage with this company. We are very progressive. So we're paying $20 an hour. But the cost of having that person actually do that job is greater than just the wage itself. So let's look at the other cost elements. So we have here where it says employers, FICA, and Medicare, 7.65%. And what that is, you work a job, and on that job, what comes out of your pay when you receive your weekly, bi-weekly, monthly paycheck, there's a deduction there for Social Security and Medicare. Well, as a business is required to match whatever the employee contributes. So when you're talking about defining the cost of this employee doing this cleaning service, the $20 wage, but now we got to take 7.65% of the $20 and add that to the cost. So that's $1.53 of Social Security and Medicare that business has to pay. That's part of the cost. Let's say that they're also providing some health insurance. And the health insurance premium that they are paying for the year for this employee, the employer share, they're paying $1,000. And let's say this employee works 1,750 hours. That's 50 hours, 50 weeks times 35 hours a week. That's 1,750 hours. Well, you take the $1,000 and divide it by the 1,750 hours, and now I got 57 cents of healthcare costs in the cost of this employee being out doing these cleaning services. So it's not $20 an hour, it's $20 plus $1.53 plus now 57 cents. Then I have unemployment insurance, and I have up here 2%. And that's just for this example. The number doesn't mean anything. It may not apply. That rate may not apply to you. This is just for illustration purposes. So I'm saying 2%, $20, that's another 40 cents. Workers' compensation insurance that the employer is responsible for. That's that insurance that covers the employee if they are hurt on the job. It's workers' compensation that pays them while during the period where they can't work. That's another example. It's just the 2%, just for illustration purposes. It doesn't mean anything in terms of what the real requirement is. There are a lot of other factors that determine that. But for this example, I'm saying 2%, that's another 40 cents. And let's say that you're giving this employee 2 weeks vacation also. Like I said, we are a generous, progressive cleaning company. So 2 weeks vacation, he's making working 35 hours a week, $20 an hour. That's about, for 2 weeks, that's $1,400 divided by the 1,750 hours a week. That's about 80 cents. So the real cost of this labor is not $20, it's $23.70. Does everybody see that? Now, I have a question in the chat. It's about unemployment and workers' comp. Tracy asks, what if I keep my workers around 20 to 30 hours a week for the first year? I only have to pay unemployment or workers' comp insurance. If you have employees, you got to pay that workers' comp. You got to pay that unemployment. I don't know what the health insurance requirement is now that we have Obamacare. You don't have to give them vacation, but you are correct in terms of you having to be required to pay the unemployment and the workers' comp. Any other question about that labor piece involving this cleaning service? Because there are some other categories of expenses that make up the cost of this service. So we just dealt with the labor piece of it, of doing the job. So now let's talk about other areas of cost that are involved in providing this service. Now here's one, the supervisor. And I get this a lot with small companies. Let's say that the owner of the business got a couple of people that are doing the cleaning for them. And the owner may be doing some supervising of the job. They may be doing some other things for the business in terms of going out to get the cleaning supplies or other equipment that they may have. Well, the supervision, that's part of the job. So if you are the owner, you should put your cost in this cost of service when determining what the real costs are to provide the service, because if you had someone else other than yourself as the supervisor, you would have to pay their cost. So just because it's you and you haven't decided whether you're going to take a salary or not or whatever, that has nothing to do with it. It's a responsibility that has to be done. There's a cost associated with it. So you place it in as a part of your cost of goods or cost of service. The second one, administrative costs or administrative reports. Let's say with this cleaning service, we are cleaning an environmentally sensitive business. And because it is, there are certain reports that this business is required to submit to the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, on the chemicals it used. So the cleaning company that this company is hired has to fill out weekly reports of what chemicals it used, how much, where did they use it in the facility. If there are some reporting or administrative reporting or administrative effort that's directly associated with executing that contract, there's a cost with that. So it should be a part of the cost of goods. So if there's a person in the business that's responsible for doing these reports, and you wouldn't have to do these reports if you weren't doing this contract, and that's what kind of indicates to you that it's a part of the cost of service. Whatever you're paying that person on an hourly basis to do these reports, it becomes a part of your cost of goods, cost of service. The cleaning supplies and materials that you use, of course, that's a part of the cost. Transportation, if you're having to transport the workers to the job, or whatever transportation requirements that are involved. And the last one I have here is equipment replacement. Let's say that you got vacuums and mops and floor buffers. They're going to wear out at some point, and you're going to have to replace them. So maybe you take a look at some industry standards or some data on how long a certain buffer will last, how many floors it will do, and you have a overall percentage, 2%, 3%, whatever the case may be, for your replacement cost. So this is what I mean by including all of the elements that make up the cost of doing the job or producing the product or producing the service. You don't want to miss anything, because if you miss something in the cost, it's going to be reflected in the price. And if the price is not right, it's going to impact the gross profit and the gross profit margin. And if the gross profit is impacted, then it's going to impact the amount of money that's available to cover the operating expenses. And if there isn't enough money, or it impacts the amount of money that's there to cover the operating expenses, then the net profit is going to be impacted. So it starts with this cost of goods, cost of service. And this is an example dealing with a service type business and looking at some of those cost elements. Any questions about that piece? We're going to go through one other example that involves if you're producing a product. But any questions about that piece that we've just covered related to that cleaning service? I'll give people a little more time just in case you have some question. All right. Okay, so let's talk about a product that you may be producing. Let's say that you're making a cosmetic item, a hair product, or what have you. Well, the pieces that start to make up that cost of goods are things like, of course, the materials or the ingredients that are involved in the product. It's a hair product, tube of lipstick, some ingredient goes into making it up. So that's a part of the cost of goods. The labor that's involved. If there are people that are involved with the packaging, running the machines that produce the product or manufacture the item, people that are working on the assembly line, that's what we're talking about. So that labor is a part of the cost. And just like we talked about with the cleaning service, the labor cost is beyond just the wage. It's all of those other things that we talked about: unemployment, Social Security, the other benefits that are involved that makes up that cost. The package, if there's a jar or that the product goes in, and there's a cap on the jar, whatever those costs are for those package items, you include that cost. The label, and it may be a printed label, it may be a label that's silk screened or burned onto the jar, whatever the case may be. There's some cost involved with that. So you include that cost of the label in the cost of goods. If you have, say, some instruction material in it. My partner and I were selling a product that we had. Inside that product, there was an instruction sheet that came along with it. That instruction sheet probably cost us a quarter of a cent to produce it. To produce it doesn't seem like a whole lot of money, but if you are producing 100,000 or 200,000 of these items, a quarter of a cent starts to add up. So you want to include that cost. Freight in, freight out. That's the product coming to you and you shipping it out to your customer. You want to include that in as a part of your cost of goods. If you are showing or offering any kind of warranty or guarantees, those things make up part of the cost of product, cost of service. Damages and waste. If you're manufacturing a product or producing a product, let's say that you are making this hair care product and you're mixing it up in a big vat, well, you aren't going to get every ounce out of that vat or whatever you mixing it up in. Some of it you just don't going to be able to get out of the corners, or there's going to be some spillage. So it's going to be some waste, and maybe a jar will get broken before it actually gets out of the warehouse. Well, that's what we call damages and waste. And maybe your experience or your industry experience says that you ought to include 1 to 2% as a percentage to calculate your damages and your waste. The important piece is you want to account for that in your cost of goods. And if you have a sales team that's out there selling the product to stores, individuals, whomever, and you're paying them a commission or some royalties to do that, that makes up part of the cost of goods. So I just wanted to spend some time clarifying how to identify and define the elements that are part of the cost of goods. Just want to make sure everybody got that. All right. Any questions before we proceed to talk about operations? Any question pertaining to cost of goods, cost of service? And like I have indicated before, if you think of some question after the session that you need answered, you could always email me, and what that question is, or respond. Or if you have come in on next Saturday during our live session and you got a series of questions, we can talk about them at that time. but I have no problem answering whatever questions you may have. So everybody's okay? I'll give it a few more seconds for people to ask questions. Okay, well, with that, we'll move into operations. And as I said earlier, operations would have been something that we would have done a couple of weeks ago, but we're okay. And this operations is a part of step 3 in planning. The process that we've gone through thus far, we have defined the business, we did some research to verify or learn more about the assumptions that we were made about our business definition. Our research taught us some things that may be different, may have confirmed some things. But after we did that research, then we were ready to get into this planning phase. So we started with the marketing piece. And then we proceeded to take a look at the financial piece of it, the financial management. So now the third leg of the planning piece is operations. And that's what we're talking about in operations are the day-to-day functions to keep the business rolling or to keep the business functioning. So one of the things that we will open up with is dealing with the area that's really a part of marketing and sales, but it's included in this operations discussion. So it's really not a big deal where we are talking about it, but the important thing to note as we get into this operations conversation, we're going to be talking about the value of retaining customers and how we do that. And this first illustration here is going to just kind of take us through this value proposition related to retaining customers. Now, the reason that this is an important piece of the conversation, the cost of getting a new customer is always more expensive than serving a customer that you already have. And what we're trying to do within our operational system as a part of it is to put in place a mechanism to make sure that once we get a customer, we have a system in place that keeps them a customer and keeps them buying the products and services that we're offering. So in this illustration, the marketplace is made up of consumers, and we're going to call them strangers because at this point, they may not know anything about our business. You may not know anything. You may not know what individuals out there that actually will purchase from you. So, we're strangers to one another. But through some of your advertising, be it in a magazine, an ad you did on the radio, an email that you may have sent out, an article that you posted, this person has become interested. So they decide to visit your business, visit your website, stop in Jerry's store to see what he really has. But there was a cost involved in terms of getting that person to that point because that advertising cost you something. So in this example, and this dollar amount is just for the example, it has no relationship to what the real cost of getting a customer is. It's just for illustration purposes. I'm saying that it's going to cost you $3 to get that customer. And once you, or to get that visitor. And once they become a visitor, Then you want to turn them into a prospect, meaning that you've told them a little bit about what it is that you have, how it's different. You've related to them the value. Maybe they have tested one of Jerry's bikes in terms of riding it around his little test track that's in the store. And they become a prospect. And you're hoping that that prospect then becomes a customer. He's ridden that bicycle in Jerry's little test track in his store, and he really likes it. Jerry talks to him about all the features and benefits of it, and they become a customer. They purchase. But those first two steps, the visitor, the prospect, it costs something. And usually that cost associated with getting them there is going to cost more than keeping them. So the person makes a purchase. And once they make that purchase, then what goes into play for us is how can I retain this customer? Because it's by retaining them where I really get a chance to make money on them. And that's what we're getting at when we're talking about this value of retaining customers and building a system within our operations of our business to make sure that we are focused on retaining them. This is a big key in terms of growing your business and making money in your business. Is by the customers that you get, retaining them. So in this next slide, what we're going to talk about are what are the things that and the value that's represented by existing customers. The first thing is up here in our left circle at the top, where they become repeat customers. Maybe the item that they bought, they liked, that lipstick that they sampled and actually purchased, maybe they like it, so they come in regularly and buy that. But in addition to that, they become candidates for upsell. You like the lipstick? Well, here's the blush that goes along with it. Or here's the makeup brush kit that you should use to apply this, because it goes on a lot smoother if you use the items that we have. And the person has already had a good experience with the first item. So that upsell, I like that items anyway. I'll try this next thing. So they become candidates for the upsell or cross-selling opportunities. Let's say that I have this lipstick line, but I also have a salon that I do hair, makeup, what have. So I tell that person, you come by your lipstick, but also there's a special that we're running in our salon, and here's a coupon for buying the upsell item that if you go to the salon, you can use it and it will reduce your cost of a facial by X. You have that kind of opportunity with an existing customer. The other benefit is they're candidates to launch new items. When you come out with new items, people that have already had a great experience with what it is that you sell and the type of company that you have, they're more apt to purchase the new items that you introduced. So it all translates into more dollars for you. The second area in the top circle to the right, those customers can become ambassadors, promoters, and loyalists. And when we say ambassadors, they can tell other people about their experience and how great your company is. They may be promoting it. I remember a few years ago, my wife's friend was getting married, and the participants in the wedding wanted to make sure that their dresses fit. Well, my wife ran into a product that was a cleanser, internal cleansing item that also claimed that it would help reduce weight relatively quick. And she bought it, tried it, and it worked. And she promoted and told other ladies. The company that she bought this product from, I know the owner. And he called me and said to me that the sales that they had been getting that particular month, they had never seen anything like it before. They had to put on a double shift. And it all came from the conversation that was circulating around internet, social media sites about this product. One person promoting it to the other. So that's the advantage of existing customers that they can do for you. Another role, product testers. I'm thinking of coming out with a new item, but I need to get some feedback from the marketplace to confirm that it is what I think it is. Let me go to some of the good customers or some of these customers that have experienced me as part of my testing to allow them to give me feedback. Does this stack up with what you regularly see coming from us? Is that quality the same? And those product testers can save you money. And those people that already have experienced you, already have a relationship with you, can be a great source of testing an item before you introduce it. And with what's going on with crowdfunding these days, people are able to now raise equity amounts for their businesses. One of the good places that people can look to are existing customers that feel good about their business and they want to invest. So retaining good existing customers pays dividends in many many ways for your business. And that's why this system of retaining them is so important to you as a business owner. And in a couple of minutes, we're going to talk about the system that actually does that and how to put that together. But the point that we're emphasizing at this point is that you want to be concentrating on how you're going to keep a customer. Everybody okay with that? Okay. So now the key thing about to retain customers is that you're trying to touch them as often as you can, as many ways as you can. And when I say touch, I don't mean physically put your hands on them. What I do mean is staying in contact with them. They are hearing from you, or you are communicating with them on things other than just buy, but you're sharing value with them. You have an ongoing dialogue and relationship. There are many ways for them to encounter you. That's what we mean by touching them. And you want to touch them as often as you can, as many ways as you can. So let's just talk about some of the ways that you can touch, build a relationship with, communicate, connect with your customers. And the first thing we're going to talk about is content. The big asset for businesses in today's marketplace is sharing content that's meaningful and that has value with the marketplace. And usually it's the sharing of that content that gets them interested in you in the first place. You write an article or you post a picture of a food item that you produce on Instagram. You share the recipe with people, and other people send in reviews and talk about how great it is. And you put together a little video to show people exactly how to work with the item and what it does for them. That's sharing meaningful content, and that's how you probably have connected with them. So continuing to do that helps build that relationship to retain a customer. So it may be a blog that you publish where you place articles and valuable information or photos, recipes, whatever it supports the product or service or the business that you're in. There are newsletters, helpful hints and recommendations, sharing user content and testimonials. Maybe some customer that you have has shot a little video, put it up on YouTube, talk about how great you are, and sharing that kind of information with your existing customer base helps you to retain them. So these are ways, and this is what we mean by touch them as often as you can in as many ways as you can. The second way that we can talk about actually maintaining touches with them is through promotions and sharing other value opportunities with the customers, giving them incentives. You buy 2 of my items a day, the third one you'll get free, sharing coupons with them, cents off, dollars off, buy now, but sharing that extra promotional value with them. Maybe there are reward points. You buy, visit the store 5 times. On your 6th visit, your food item is free. Or you buy lipstick, you buy 5 lipsticks, and after you purchase 5, the 6th one is free. Maybe there are memberships in a club that you're offering, or a group or community, where there are special opportunities or special promotions, special sales that are offered. But these are other ways to maintain that touch and to build a relationship with your existing customers, which enhances your ability to retain them. All right. And then the third way that we can talk about maintaining this connection with them is through observing customer milestones, greeting people during their birthdays, sending out a birthday greeting, virtual card. Maybe they have an anniversary of a job, their marriage, kids being born. You can recognize those anniversaries, and maybe there's some kind of loyalty recognition. You've been a customer of our business for the last 5 years, and in appreciation of that, we're going to honor you with some special reward or some special opportunity. That's just another way of maintaining that touch and building that relationship with the existing customers that help you retain those customers. And by retaining them, they keep purchasing your products, and they add to the products and services that you offer to the things that they buy. That increases your sales, helps your company grow. And it's existing customers that help push you toward that kind of success in your business. All right, any questions about that? Any questions? So now, let's talk about what some vehicles that facilitate that touch. We talked about the value content, promotions, customer recognition. Well, here are the vehicles to facilitate the touch. You might be using social media networks like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. But regular and consistent involvement or use of those tools help deliver that content, those promotions, that customer recognition vehicle, those customer recognition announcements. It's through social media that becomes a vehicle to deliver that. Or maybe it's through email, where on a regular basis, you are sharing that content, those promotional opportunities with your existing customers on a regular basis. And the third way, maybe you're doing live events, be it appearing at a festival or some live event that you are sponsoring yourself, a customer appreciation event. But these are the vehicles to facilitate the touch opportunities. The thing that we are trying to communicate here is that you want to have a system in place for retaining your customers, because retaining them and this system to retaining them is one of the most valuable assets that you're going to have in the operations of your business. So this system that I keep referring to, we call it a service cycle. It's the cycle of things that happen, the cycle of these touch opportunities that make up your system for retaining customers. So we're going to take a look at Jerry's service cycle. And Jerry has customers that purchase either by coming in the store or visiting his website. And when they do, after that, be it a week later, a few days, a couple of the day of, they get a thank you from Jerry. And not only do they get a thank you, they get some coupon that comes along with it that entitles them to make an additional purchase. Maybe make an additional purchase on some other item other than what they bought. But it's that coupon and that thank you that becomes that first touch that Jerry has in his service cycle. And then the other piece that Jerry has is his regular blog and his social media interaction and special incentives that he does during the course of the month to maintain that connection, to maintain that touch and those touch opportunities with his customers, his existing customers. And then later on, as we come into the spring and summer, Jerry has or participate in this bike race. Big City, where Jerry's located, has this bike race every year where Jerry makes sure he participates. He does some promos at that bike race. He sets up him a booth that displays his products that he sells, his bikes. Customers can come up and sign up for special giveaways or special promotions, but those are touch opportunities. And yes, he'll be touching new customers as well, or new um, customer opportunities, but it also represents another opportunity to stay in touch with those existing customers. And then later on in the summer, Jerry has the bike club and his big bike club registration weeks, where or days, where during the 5 days people can register for the bike club. They get all kinds of paraphernalia and um, little rider tips that come along with being a part of the bike club, sharing information. They're in the community. They can ask questions about biking to one another or send them in to Jerry, and Jerry will try to get experts that he's affiliated with bikers in the bike business to interact with them. Just more value opportunity that he's sharing, but also touching and connecting with his customers. And then later on, he has this special week where he has bike activity week. This is just an example of what we're talking about, this system. And we call it a service cycle. And what it's made up of is defined activities that become a regular part of your business that's geared toward retaining customers. And you want to make sure, each one of you, that you have a system in place for doing this. It doesn't have to be as extensive as what we just talked about with Jerry. And maybe you will start off with just a few activities to maintain that touch and increase them as you get more resource to work with. The thing that's important to realize is that this kind of system should be a standard part of the operations of your business. Everybody okay with that? Any questions? Any questions about retaining customers and that service cycle? Any questions? So we're doing okay. So let's go to the next area of operations. And this deals with the key functions in the business. And we're going to look at 4 things: identifying the areas of function, identifying what are the key tasks in those areas, how is it going to get done, or who's going to get done, and how much does it cost. And this is how you start to put together the operations, the other piece of the operations plan of your business. Because in the operations plan, you're identifying the areas of responsibility. What are the jobs that have to be done? So in this slide that's being displayed currently, the first thing is to identify the areas of function. So these are just examples, and you may have some additional areas in your business. But for example, the areas may be sales and marketing. I got some distribution because I got to ship merchandise. We got some financial management functions that need to be taken care of, be it bookkeeping, paying the bills, collecting the money, whatever those responsibilities are, you are identifying them in these areas. And then there's customer service. So these are the functional areas of the business. Now it's about identifying what are the key tasks that are in each one of these areas. So, for example, in sales and marketing, one of the key tasks may be email and somebody doing the social media, or someone actually doing the sales and finding new accounts. That could be an array of activities, but whatever those tasks are, you want to identify them. And then the next piece of that is to identify, well, who's going to do it. In this example, we're just saying the owner is going to have that responsibility. The same thing with distribution. Maybe one of the key task areas could be packing orders or unloading trucks or stocking the warehouse. Who's going to do that? Well, it's this full-time staff person that we've identified that we're going to hire that's going to take care of that. Financial management, well, one of the key tasks may be bookkeeping. But instead of hiring someone to do the bookkeeping, I'm going to outsource that. So the point is, the big thing to do in operations is to identify the areas that have to be taken care of to keep the business functioning. Those areas of function. Then identify the tasks that are in those areas. And there may be multiple tasks that are associated with them. And then identify who's going to do it. And the fourth piece that I couldn't get on the same slide, but it's on the next slide, is to identify, if I have these functions, these are the tasks, here's the person that's responsible, that's going to do the task. What is it going to cost? What is the owner going to be paid? What is that staff person that's handling those distribution activities or administration or whatever those responsibilities are? And in this example, we're saying $15 an hour, $25 a week. It's just bookkeeping that you're going to outsource. Well, how much is it going to cost? $500 per month. Then I have a part-time staff person that's going to take care of the customer service responsibility, and I'm paying them $15 an hour, 15 hours per week. You want to lay out all of these four areas related to operations. And this is how you identify the operational area of your business plan. And this is how you establish the numbers of the costs that go into operations when you are doing your financial projections. Everybody clear with that? So when you want to identify what your payroll cost is going to be, or what you're paying for contractors to do certain work for you, this is how you get at defining what those tasks are and how much it's going to cost, so you can lay this information in the operations area of your financial projection. Any question about that? Any questions? Don't have any questions. We're doing okay. So this may be a little, the next slide may be a little difficult to see, but it's in the Planet module in the operations section. It's just how Jerry actually defined the functions, his staffing strategy, the cost associated with city cycle. So at your leisure, you can, review that. I just put it in this presentation to just give you a further illustration of how you can articulate this in your plans. But the thing is, the information that you need from the financials comes from you actually breaking down these operational tasks and their costs, as we've done here. Any questions? Everybody's okay? Okay. Okay, so now there are some other areas in operations that becomes a part of your operations plan. And that is things like the facilities. In Jerry's case, he's going to have the 5,000, 2,000 square foot store, and it cost him a certain amount of money, and that's what gives him the dollar figures to go into operations. But you can describe what the facilities are, what your legal structure is, be it a sole proprietorship, partnership, corporation, LLC. And in our last class, which will be Saturday the 25th, we're actually going to talk about legal structures. If there are special insurance requirements, you want to identify that in your operations. Any licenses, registration, regulations that you're going to have to deal with, those are also identified in the operations, and the costs that are associated with these items. And that gives you the data, the numbers that you need for the operations section of that financial projection. Is that pretty clear with everybody? Is that okay? Everybody's okay with that? Any questions? Any questions? Okay. Well, if there aren't any questions, that covers the information that I have in tonight's session. And just to recap a couple of things, the cost of goods, let's make sure When you're looking at what it costs you to produce a product or service, you want to identify every element that's a part of the cost structure so you can price it right. In the as it relates to this retaining of customers, the cost of a new customer is greater than the cost of keeping one that you already have. So you want to put a system in place that allows you to build a relationship and stay connected with your customer, and your customer stays connected with you. That keeps them within your community, buying your products and services, which turns into them being customers that grow your sales, but also other benefits come in the form of they become promoters, ambassadors, and loyalists for you as a business. They even may become investors for you. They can become testers of new products, which will save you some money if you find that your existing customers really don't like it, or it really doesn't meet the needs or the quality standards that they're used to receiving from you. And having a system in place that has consistent activity that you do regularly to keep you in touch with those customers, connected to them, which we call a service cycle. And everyone wants to have some element of a service cycle in their business. So now here's what we're looking at, and here's what we need to do in terms of any homework. I like to see people do the marketing and the operations plan using the template that is located on the membership site, or we're going to have a business plan format, an example of like the typical business plan up on the membership site by Friday. And you can take a look at how business plans are laid out if you want to do that. At a minimum, I want to see people at least answer those questions that are in the marketing operations sections of the template. Then, from the cash flow standpoint, I'd like everybody to use the 5-step financial tools that are on the membership site. There's a cash flow projection, tool that's on the membership site that I'd like to see everyone take the opportunity to do a cash flow projection related to your own business. Even if you aren't certain about the numbers, don't worry about that. We just want to go through the exercise of building a cash flow projection. So if it's a new business, let's think about, if I'm going to start this business, if I want to get it off the ground, what are some of the startup expenses I know that I'm going to have to get it going? And once I get it going in terms of keeping it open and having my operations, what are the operating expense categories that I think I may have? And let me just think about what some of those amounts are. We aren't worried about at this point how accurate they are. If you can be accurate, if you have done some of this homework, great. But the thing I don't want people to do is to wait on trying to get the exact number before they try the projection. I want you to go through the exercise of doing the projection, and you'll come back and correct numbers later, or use numbers that are more reflective of what's really going to be the case with your situation. And then the third thing is to read the Stage It module, which is module 4. And of course, that's on the membership site. So we want to do that between now and next Wednesday's session. Mhm. And then in the any questions about that? Any questions about that homework assignment? Any questions? Okay. Okay, so the next class, next Wednesday, online session, we're going to talk about the staging and the areas that we will be focusing on specifically will be how to create a financing plan, securing the financing. You know, what are some tips about trying to pursue financing from family and friends and how to go about it, or how to go about dealing with a financial institution, how to walk in and ask um, Kevin and Al and Steve and Abdullah for a loan at GNEC. Then we'll talk about when to spend money. And during this in this staged conversation, in the module, you'll read about Jerry and how he deals with making decisions about when it's a good time to spend money. And we'll talk a bit more about that during the session. And then some other tips related to staging your business. So that's what we will do on next Wednesday during the online session. And of course, if you have questions about anything we cover in that session or in any previous session, just let me know. But that's what next Wednesday's session will consist of. Then our final session is Saturday, June 25th, which will be a live session. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody there. It's been a while since I've seen everybody. Saw a few of you during the live session that we had a couple of weeks ago. But on the 25th, I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. And during that session, we will cover the started module and the topics that are involved there. We'll talk about the various legal structures, sole proprietorship, partnerships, LLCs, C corporations, S corporations, and how do you go about selecting what's best for you? And a lot of it relates to tax issues, but also there are some liability issues that you look at. And with those two pieces of information, you have the information you need to select the right legal structure for you. So we'll talk about tax issues, some record keeping, and I will have a handout on insurance, copyrights, and trademarks that will detail how those areas work, answer a lot of the questions, and you can just take that document and go through that pretty much on your own. So that will be the Saturday the 25th session. So does anybody have any questions for me about anything that we covered next week's session or the live session coming up on Saturday the 25th? Anybody have any questions? Any questions? Well, I hope everybody plans to come on, be able to us on the 25th. I understand that GNEC will also have some completion uh, activities or ceremony to go along with that session. So you want to make sure that you come. Yes, there will be feedback given on homework. That's the question I have. Will there be feedback given on homework? Yes. It may take a couple of days for me to get back to you, especially if I get a number of submissions, but I will get back to you with feedback. Any other questions? And I understand that there's a little delay in me seeing your questions, so that's why it's a little quiet time. But if anybody has a question, just let me know. Okay. Well, I've enjoyed this evening. I hope it has been productive for everybody that attended. As I indicated, if any other questions that come up that you may think of after the session, just email me. But I enjoyed being with you this evening. And until next week, everybody take care, have a good week, and keep pursuing your business. Keep moving forward. Don't get stuck. If there's something that you quite haven't gotten that we have covered, don't let that stop you. Don't let that make you stuck. Keep moving. Keep making progress. I want everybody to remember that, because you aren't going to get it all. You aren't going to have everything perfect. I don't want people to wait to see that everything lines up perfectly, that you have all of the things in order. Is not going to come out that way. Keep moving forward. All right. So with that, I'm going to say good evening, and I hope to see everybody on the internet on Wednesday. Take care.